So thank you very much, Patricia. Yeah, now having a look from a different angle, and I would like to come back to the presentation of Michael Fairbanks, because let's say what we're talking about today is everything about harmonization and standardization. This is, I think, one of the most important topics. So I would like to lead you through the presentation, talking about some project on harmonization, standardization, about our quality self-assessment, improve, an example for standardized documentation, change information system, electronic original manufacturer tracing, a project on supply chain transparency, and last but not least, come back to Joel's presentation on the False Blood Medicines Directive. What is important before starting with this presentation is to highlight that most of the projects are going back for years. Years even, let's say, back to the year 2007, before even Rx-360 has been founded. Therefore, this should be taken into consideration. Let's say all these activities have some lead time, and I will explain in a second, let's say, what it means in detail. Well, one of the challenges, and coming back to standardization, harmonization, is all of us are facing, let's say, the challenge of the requests of, this case, US customers asking for questionnaires, asking for regulatory documentation, change notifications, original manufacturer information, and so on. The point here is, if you as a supplier have probably hundreds of products, excipients, APIs, single-use materials, process materials, and so on and so on, you have probably hundreds of customers and all, let's say, requesting information probably in a different format. This is really a challenge, how to do this in a let's say, standardized format. And as you mentioned, Michael, also, let's say, to give, let's say, a comparable response from a global organization, so that the customer asking, let's say, for example, our services colleagues in India, the customer will receive a comparable answer, and the same question has been addressed in the US or in Europe. So this is a challenge, and let's say how to deal with it. And what I'd like to show you is, let's say, in only highlighting some of the aspects, is a project we called a project in harmonization of regulatory processes, something about quality agreements, change notifications, original manufacturer, company declarations, quality self-assessment. I won't highlight all of them this morning, but just to give you a flavor, let's say, the questions and the topics you are facing being in the supply chain on the supplier side. Well, and one of the, let's say, the most important topics and one of the most recent ones is the question of quality self-assessment. And as I highlighted, this project is going back years. Let's say this is something we developed on our own. I have to confess today, and in late 2012, early 2013, Rx-360 started the work with their working groups on the supplier-led working group on the upstream supply chain security activities. This has been developed before. Nevertheless, something would like also to contribute to the respective working groups. And this is, let's say, the topics we are facing today. On all of you here today in the audience are not members of Rx-360, but on the supplier side, I would really like to encourage you, join Rx-360 today, because all these activities and what we try to develop on our own, let's say, would be much easier together with Rx-360 and to learn from the Rx-360 members. Well, coming to this example here, what we did is, let's say, facing, let's say, the question of all our customers concerning, let's say, information on the products. This was developed a kind of template, let's say, to support our customers more easily. The point here is, let's say, if you send a questionnaire to a supplier, what happens? First of all, the supplier might not be able to answer all your questions. It might take you time, and so you need to find a solution. Besides this, the questions, let's say, frustration of the suppliers concerning probably receiving different answers. If you compare them, probably after some time, they wouldn't fit. This is something, let's say, is not a solution. But here, let's say, to harmonize it is to have a self-assessment, replacing at least many of the questionnaires, to have the self-assessment in a single format, independent, let's say, of the region, and to have speed, to speed up the process. This is also important. If you tell a customer, let's say, you need to wait for the filling in the questionnaire 2 weeks, 3 weeks, probably time more, this is frustrating. This even, let's say, is hindering business, and at the end of the day, it's not to the benefit of all of us. Let's say, therefore, if we get a quick reply in the standardized format, this is helpful for all of us. Besides this, and it's also important to have a process beside it. It doesn't make sense, let's say, if you fill in a questionnaire of a customer, let's say, and this will be, let's say, an information valid for that respective day, so to say. So if you have a system behind it, let's say, to periodically review the information, let's say, distributed to your customers, let's say, to be really sure that this information is really up to date. And last but not least, let's say, to have it for multiple users, as you mentioned it, because, let's say, questionnaires are, let's say, brought to the suppliers for different reasons. Let it be an information for pre-audit, let it be a kind of paper audit, let it be very general information on a company or its products. Therefore, let's say this is something to keep in mind, and therefore a quality self-assessment in a standardized format is a solution to this. We have it in a modular way. Just here on this slide, let's say a very general one, let's say, first of all, ISO 9001, self-assessment, very general, and then below more in detail, the self-assessment related to the sites, the self-assessment related to GMP products, and in future, animal-derived products, in future, even probably more. This is something probably also, Jim and Bretta, let's say, to be discussed in the respective working group of Rx-360. Is this a format also could be useful for other members of Rx-360? Is there anything like that we would share, let's say, with others as an approach? Another topic, going back, let's say, to the first decade of this century, the CTD format launched in 2003. At that time, quite a lot of our customers started asking us more and more details upon, for example, pharmaceutical excipients. Let's say, tell us, let's say, how is the product manufactured? What about certificates on BSE, TSE, GMO, and the other things? What about, let's say, could you provide us with a brief description of the manufacturing process? What about the analytical procedures? Can you give an update on that one? What about stability? Do you have any data available to, let's say, to verify that, let's say, your stability information retest period, let's say, is based on sound science? What we did, and as mentioned, this is going back, let's say, to the year 2004 in the meantime, we created a so-called improved product range, improved dossier, where we put for high-quality pharmaceutical excipients together an information package structured according to the CTD format, Common Technical Document, the respective chapter for drug substance. The information is not intended to be used for a registration process with the authorities for an excipient as a drug substance, not at all. What we did is, we took the structural elements, the respective chapters, and filled in the appropriate information for pharmaceutical excipients. The rationale behind this information is needed by the pharmaceutical manufacturer, let's say, to get an impression, let's say, how the material is produced, tested, and so on and so on. Kind of preparation for probably before an audit, to have everything together, let's say, in one package. To have all information at hand. This information is not provided in a paper format or in single sheets. You can download part of the information free of charge from the internet, or you can, let's say, get, let's say, more comprehensive information. Let's say you can purchase it on a CD. The idea behind this, and you must imagine that this information package is in the meantime available for roughly 400 different products, is to have the comprehensive information structured, let's say, in a well-known format, to have it easy at hand, to deal easily with, because, let's say, it's an electronic format. Such an idea, for example, is something, let's say, how to, let's say, support, let's say the process, how to standardize the respective information and to make life easier for the supply chain. From this one, coming to another topic very briefly, is a question of, let's say, quality relevant changes. Also a big topic in the market, let's say, how to deal with changes. As I mentioned, if you have many customers, many products, how to manage that. And the idea here behind this project is, let's say, we have created an IT system with two functionalities. One is a kind of database for quality assurance agreements and change control agreements. The other part is, let's say, an automatic system of mailing information on changes to our customers. Idea behind this, let's say, to have first-hand, let's say, to have the data in a validated system, to be really sure, let's say, with whom we agreed upon which product, a quality agreement, a change notification, what should be the content of the change notification. Also to, let's say, to be aware, very important point, let's say, who's the respective contact at the customer. It's also something. Roger mentioned, for example, let's say companies change, companies merge. Let's say priorities might be different, but this is well for both sides. Could also be, for example, you see on the customer side, the pharmaceutical manufacturer, responsibilities change. In the moment you have a change, and you want as a supplier to inform the respective company, how do you know if this person is still, let's say, the right contact? It's also something to keep in mind. There are both sides in this business. This is another example. The advantage of such a system like this is, for example, it's validated, it's very quick, it's speed, it's complete, it's reliable, and again, it's harmonized, coming back to Michael's presentation. What's also important, besides, let's say, to have the database with agreements and, let's say, the automatic mailing, is also to have the information in a standardized format, something also Rx-360 is working on, let's say, to have a kind of template to make it really clear, let's say, to have it concise, straightforward, the information easily available, let's say, with everything that's important, also to harmonize the notifiable change types, let's say, to agree upon, let's say, what is, let's say, low, medium, and high risk change, for example. Important thing to take into consideration. Another topic, also we talk about supply chain. Let's say traditionally probably a company produced materials and sold it to another company. Nowadays things are much more complex, this is trivial, but nevertheless, let's say if you take in consideration that we have quite a lot of materials in the market, not all materials, let's say, are probably manufactured by one company. It's important, let's say, to get the information, let's say, who is original manufacturer, how to get this information. And this has two sides. One is, for example, let's say, to get the information very quickly. On the other side, also there are some, let's say, confidentiality issues. Therefore, let's say, traditionally, probably, if you want a disclosure of original manufacturer, you need to sign a CDA. Then you receive the information. It's potentially a lengthy process. And let's say, we changed it to a different approach. We have a web-based approach. On this one, we launched at CPHI in October last year to have a quick information for our customers who's original manufacturer. The rationale behind it and the benefits for the customers are, let's say, it's really secure, slot specific. This is very important for all regulated products, and that you only need once a CDA, so to streamline the process, to reduce paperwork and make it simpler. On the other hand, also for the supplier, let's say, to ensure the confidentiality of the information, that we really know who has access to this respective information. Another topic is, let's say, in general terms, supply chain transparency. A big topic. We approach it like this. Let's say we started a project together with one of our customers, and the question is, let's say, how to manage supply chain transparency. Let's say, and it's described here, what this is in the highest level is the full transparency, but the question is, what does it mean in practical terms and how to apply it? Again, to take in consideration, let's say you have many products, probably not all products are manufactured at the same sites. Some products might have been manufactured by contract manufacturers. So it's important, let's say, to on one hand, to have this information available because, for good reasons, customer would like to know. On the other hand, let's say, how to manage all that. And very briefly, this is the example here. Let's say we are working together with a company, let's say, managing the respective data, having a kind of, let's say, collection and a system to have all the data available. This is still, let's say, an ongoing project, as you see, but the idea behind this, let's say, to have a mapping of the suppliers, to have a 24/7 event monitoring on this. We're starting now in 2014, let's say, with a total of 100 suppliers entered into the database for filters, for example, single-use systems, and so on. This is an ongoing project. I would say it's also, let's say, in line with activities here within Rx-360. Probably, if there's a next opportunity, I will report on the results on this one, but we're very optimistic, let's say, to find a way, means, let's say, to support our customers from this perspective. Coming, due to the sake of time, to the last topic, I'm coming back to the presentation of Gerald and the Pharmaceutical Medicines Directive. Also briefly here, important topic is the formalized risk assessment on excipients and how to deal, let's say, with the risk assessment and all the necessary information that is requested by the pharmaceutical manufacturer. And also, only briefly to summarize, let's say, the question of the appropriate GMP and of the excipient manufacturer's risk profile. So the first time we're talking about risk this morning. And so let's say the questions, let's say, how can an excipient supplier, a pharmaceutical excipient supplier, in this case, let's say, read an appropriate format, proof, let's say, or let's say, support the pharmaceutical manufacturer in evaluating the risk profile. And traditionally, Also, let's say something very common is, let's say you have probably a paper audit, on-site audit, you have change control agreements, quality agreements in place. This is part of the story. This is quite an effort, and everybody involved, and I think everybody here in the room today is aware of, let's say, the effort, let's say you have to comply with all that. One way of a challenge we are facing is the question of the on-site audits, because on-site audits, let's say, they're necessary. Rx-360 has its own scheme on on-site audits, but the challenge for all of us, let's say, is cost time, cost money. And concerning the excipient risk assessment, there's, let's say, a complementary approach. It's not a competition to Rx-360, but it's Exipact. Probably can go into the discussion briefly on this one. It's an interesting scheme because Exipact is a site-oriented pharmaceutical excipient audit or certification scheme based on, let's say, generally agreed upon GMP and GDP standards. Again, one example, let's say, of a kind of pragmatic time and resources, let's say, optimized way of, let's say, how to get, first of all, let's say, information on the risk profile of an excipient manufacturer and supplier, and also to get the necessary information on, let's say, the GMP and GDP status. I would like to end my presentation, my brief talk this morning, again with addressing all of you today here in the room and participate in this workshop who are representing companies not being member of the Rx-360. What I wanted to present you here are things that, let's say, will also, let's say, contribute to Rx-360, and also we as a company learn from Rx-360, and I encourage everybody who's not a member, really become a member. It's really worthwhile. Thank you very much.